Next, non-current long-term liabilities, end of chapter questions from your curriculum. A company issues 1 million euro bonds at face value. When the bonds are issued, the company will record what? When the bonds are issued, company receive cash. So is it investing cash? Of course not. We are not making an investment. In fact, we are receiving money by issuing bonds. It's cash flow from financing activities. Yes. It is not cash inflow from, it's an inflow from financing activity. So straightforward question, that makes B to be our correct option. Next, at the time of issue of 4.5% coupon bonds, the effective interest rate, called the market rate of interest at the date of issue, was 5%. The bonds are most likely issued at what? Now, we have just little while ago, when the market rate of interest is greater than the coupon rate, you are offering less rate, the market rate of interest is high, so it's a discount bond basically. We discussed this in detail. It's a discount bond. But if the market rate of interest is less than the coupon rate, in that case the bond is the premium, and that we discussed a little while ago. So since your offered rate is 4.5, whereas the market interest rate or effective interest rate is 5%, so your bond will be a discount bond. That's B. All right. Oil Exploration LLC paid $45,000 in printing, in legal fee, in commissions, and in other costs associated with the recent bond issue. $45,000. It is most likely to record these costs on its financial statement as what? We just discussed a little while ago that issuance costs under the US GAAP are capitalized, made an asset, and released to income statement shoya over the life of the bond. But under the IFRS, it is netted off against the cash proceeds. So it is recognized as an asset under the US GAAP to be amortized over the life of the bond or the term of the bond, and reduction of the carrying value of the debt under IFRS. Absolutely perfect. You got it right. That's A. Under the US GAAP, expenses on issuance of bonds, they are capitalized and amortized over the life of the bonds. True. A is the right answer. Next, a company issues $1 million face value 10 years bond on 1st January 2015. When the market interest rate on the bond was of comparable risk and term was 5%. Bond pays 6% interest annually. The 6% is the coupon rate. Market rate of interest is 5%. Since your coupon is more than the market rate of interest of comparable bonds of similar terms, so it will sell at a premium. At the time of issue, the bond payable reflected on the balance sheet will be valued at what? So for this you will use the TVM function of your calculator. So you need to enter the face value, the fair value or the redemption value of $1 million. I hope all of you have your calculators with you. N is 10. Interest rate per period, MRI, remember, not coupon. Coupon is used to calculate the payments. Remember, gentlemen, ladies, the coupon is used to calculate your interest payments. 6% of $1 million is equal to 60,000. So you have face value 1 million, N10, market rate of return or market rate of interest 5%, PMT 60,000. You just have to press CPT and press present value. You will get 1077217/349. which if rounded off will give you C to be the correct option. C. Next, Midland Brands issues 3-year bonds, that is N3, dated 1st January 2015 with a face value of $5 million. FV. The market interest rate on the bonds of comparable risk and term is 3%. That is your MRI or interest rate per period if the bond pays 2.5% annually. Now this is your coupon rate. On 31st December, bonds payable when issued are most likely reported at what? Since your coupon rate is less than the market rate, so it will sell at a discount. How we will calculate? FV is 5 million. Interest rate per period 3%. PMT, the payment of interest, I said calculated based upon your coupon. 2.5% of 5 million gives you $125,000 per year. N is 3. You just press CPT, punch PV, you will get 4929284/716. And this perfectly matches with your option A. A it is. A firm issues a bond with a coupon rate of 5% when the market interest rate was 5.5. This is the market rate of interest on bonds of comparable risk and terms. 1 year later, the market interest rate increases to 6%. Based on this information, the effective interest rate is, apparently most of you will jump at this rate. No. We will take 5.5%. Why? Because for bond valuation, market rate of interest is the rate prevalent at the time of issuance of the bond. When we issued the bonds at that time, the rate, market rate on bonds of comparable risk and terms was 5.5. Now this would be your effective interest rate, 5.5. B. Next, now this question requires some serious computations. On January 1st, 2010, Elegant Fragrances Company issues £1 million face value 5-year bonds with annual interest payments of £55,000, £55,000 to be paid each 31st December. That's an annual payment. The market interest rate is 6%. This is clearly 5.5. Your coupon rate is lower than the market rate, so it's a discount bond. Using the effective interest rate method of amortization, Elegant Fragrances is most likely to record what? An interest expense of £55,000 on its 2010 income statement. This £55,000 is the interest payment. Interest payment is, remember, the face value times the coupon rate. This is not interest expense. Interest expense is equal to the carrying value of the bond multiplied by the market interest rate. We just saw a little while ago. So this is incorrect. The liability of 982,674 on 31st December 2010. Now, gentlemen, this is something that you need to take special care of. We do not need the book value of the bond at the start of the issuance on 1st January 2010. We need the value of the bond at 31st December 2010, which means there are no more 5 periods. There are 4 periods only. 1 year is gone. So what you're going to write, face value is £1 million. Number of periods, not 5 anymore, 4. Payment of interest is given as £55,000. Interest rate per period, market rate of interest, that is 6%. We just have to calculate CPT PV and you get 982,674/47. That's 0.47. So yes, this is the liability at the balance sheet date on 31st December 2010. 58,736 cash outflow for operating activities on 2010 statement of cash flows. Yes, cash operating activity, interest payment on bond, it is considered an operating cash flow. But is it? This is 55,000. This is the cash flow for interest payment. This probably is your interest expense. How do we calculate interest expense? Interest expense is equal to the carrying value of the bond, which we did not calculate because that would have required us to put N5. So the carrying value of the bond multiplied by 6%, that is the rate we need to use for calculation of interest expense. So clearly this is not right. So B is our right answer. The value of the bond, the liability on the balance sheet is 982,674. That makes B to be the correct option. Next, Consolidated Enterprises issues 10 million euros face value 5 years bonds with a coupon rate of 6.5%. At the time of issuance, the market interest rate is 6%. Using the effective interest rate method of amortization, that's what we have been doing so far, the carrying value after 1 year will be closest to. Same thing we did a little while ago. Face value, the value at which the bond will be redeemed is 10 million euros. Since we want to calculate the value at the end of the year, so we won't take 5 years now, we'll take 4. We need to calculate the carrying value 1 year after the issue. So n is equal to 4. Interest rate, MRI, it's going to be 6%. Payment, that is the interest payment, it is 6.5% of 10 million. It's going to be euros $650,000. Just you need to press CPT, press present value, and you will get your values 10,173,255, and which is approximately 10.17 A. A company issues 10 million euros face value 10-year bonds dated 1st January 2015 when the market interest rate on the bond of comparable risk was 6%. This is the MRI. The bond pays 7% in interest annually. So this is your coupon rate, which is more than the market rate of interest. Clearly, it's a premium bond. Based on the effective interest rate method, the interest expense on 31st December 2015. Interest expense, remember, is calculated on the carrying value is multiplied by the market rate of interest, 6%. So we do not have the carrying value. So for that, we need to calculate the value we will receive at the issuance of the bond. So FV is equal to 10 million. The rate we use for discounting is 6%. The payment of interest is calculated on coupon. It's 7% of 10 million. That is euros $700,000 or 700 euros, 700,000 euros, and N is equal to 10. This will give you the cash proceeds against the issuance of the bond. That's 10736,008.71. Since we are talking about the interest expense for the first year, you're simply multiplying the carrying value with 6%. This will give you 644,160.52, which is approximately. So remember the difference between 10 million and the value you received, this 736,008.71. This is your premium that needs to be amortized over the life of the bond, 10 years. So A is the right answer. Next. A company issues 30 million face value of 5-year bonds dated 1st January 2015 when the market interest rate on bonds of comparable risk and terms was 5%. The bond pays 4% interest annually on 31st December. Based on the effective interest rate method, the carrying amount of the bond on 31st December 2015. Similar to the previous question, we issued the bond on January 1st, 2015. We need to calculate the value of the bond at 31st December 2015. So what you're going to do, FV is equal to 30 millions. Interest rate for discounting is MRI, that is 5%. The interest payment is based upon the coupon, which is 4%, times 30 million. It will give you 1.2 million. Now remember, since we want to calculate the value at the end of the first year, so the 5-year bond, now we'll put N4. CPT, present value, will give you 28,936,214/85, and that makes C to be the correct option. C it is. Okay, now this question needs some serious working. You may have to tabulate the information. Lesp Industries issues 5 years bonds dated 1st January 2015 with a face value of $2 million, 3% coupon rate paid annually. At the end of every year, the market interest rate on the bonds of comparable risk was 4%. This is MRI. This is your coupon rate. So market rate is more than this. It's a discount bond. The sale proceeds of the bonds are 1.9 million. You can see 2 million face value bond brings you 1.910964 discounted. Under the effective interest rate method, the interest expense in 2017, now this is twisted now because the bond was issued on 1st January 2015, whole of 2015, whole of 2016, and whole of 2017. So you need an amortization table like this. You will first calculate, and I think you have already been given the value you received, 1.910964. This is the starting value of your bond. Now, this is what we did in our overview. Your interest is paid on coupon. 3% of 2 million, that is 60,000 every year. But the expense is calculated by multiplying the carry value of the bond with the market rate of interest, 4%. So you will calculate 1910,964, 4%, This is the interest expense that goes to income statement. The difference between what you paid versus what is charged as an expense gives you the amortization of discount. This amount will be added to 1.9 million. So the new balance will be 1927. Next year, this new balance, you'll multiply 4% with this new balance. This will be your interest expense that goes to income statement. This is what you have paid. The difference between these two is the discount amortized in 2016. This amount will be added to the carrying value of the bond. The bond now jumps to 1.944 million. This will be the balance at which we will charge expense next year. 1,944,499 times 4%. This is the expense in 2017. That was needed. So you needed a table like this to calculate your interest expense in 2017. So that makes 77,780 B to be your correct option. And B it is. Next. For a bond issued at premium, using the effective interest rate method, the carrying amount increases each year. Yes, we discussed this while studying. You can see right here, your premium, your discount both increase every year. If it's a discounted bond, your amount of discount amortized every year increases. If it's a premium bond issued at premium, the premium amortized every year will increase. That must be remembered. So for a bond issued at premium using effective interest rate method, the carrying amount increases each year? No. For a premium bond, the carrying amount falls. For a discount bond, carrying amount increases. For a discount bond, carrying value increases every year. But for a premium bond, the bond issued at premium, its carrying amount decreases each year. Wrong. Amortization of premium increases each year. That's correct. Amortization of discount increases each year. Both of these statements would have been correct, because whether it is discount or premium, the amount of amortization of premium or discount, it increases each year. B is the right answer. We need to look no further. Next. Now this is an alternative treatment of your discount, amortization and premium amortization. I need your full attention. Compt Industries issues 3 million worth of 3 years bonds dated 1st January 2015. The bonds pay interest 5.5% annually on December 31st. That's coupon. The market interest rate on the bonds of comparable risk and term was 5%. This is your market rate of interest and this is your coupon rate. Your coupon is more than the market rate, so it's going to be a premium bond. The sale proceeds of the bonds brought you 3.04 million. That is $40,849 more than the face value, the par value. This is your premium which will be amortized. But under what method? This is the difference in this question. Under the straight line method, the interest expense in the first year is closest to. Previously, we have been using effective interest method to amortize discount and premium, but under the straight line method, what you do, you simply divide this amount of premium. Since it's a 3-year bond, you divide it with 3. It means every year the premium amortization will be 13616. Right? So how did we calculate it? If you remember, your interest expense is calculated by multiplying the carrying value with the effective with the market rate of interest. There is another way to calculate. Let me show you how. This is the interest expense. this is the interest paid, and this is the amortization of discount. In case of discount amortization, your expense is equal to paid plus discount amortized, right? But in case if it's a premium bond, there will be change. Interest expense is equal to what you have paid minus premium amortized in that year. Interest expense is equal to paid plus discount amortized, and interest expense in case of premium, paid minus premium amortized. So that's what you're going to do in this question. So your interest expense will be equal to what you have paid minus 13,616. This will be your interest expense in year 1. Same interest expense in year 2. Why? Because your premium is amortized on straight line basis. And same in 3. Interest expense is what you paid minus 13,616. What you've paid, interest paid minus 13,616. So remember, in the straight line method, whether it is discount or premium, it is amortized in equal installments way, this way. That's the only question I think in your EOCs requiring you to calculate the amortization under the straight line method. Next, question number 14. The management of Bank Easy repurchases its own bonds in the open market. They pay 6.5 million for bonds. This is the amount you paid, redemption amount, or you can say extinguishment of debt at 6.5 million euros. Redemption. With the face value of 10 million, face value is irrelevant. We need to see what was the carrying value. Carrying value was 9.8 million. Now, our liability in our books, which was standing at 9.8 million, we extinguished that liability by paying 6.5 only. Our liability in our books for 9.8 million has been settled by paying just 6.5 million. The difference, gentlemen, is 3.3 million euros. It's a gain to be reported in your income statement. It's a gain of 3.3 million on the income statement. C is the right answer. A company redeems 1 million face value bonds with a carrying value of 990. This is the value in your books, book value or carrying value. And we have paid, if the call price, the price that we pay in case if you want to redeem is 104. That is 1.04 times the face value. That is 104,000. This is what you have paid. So you have settled a liability that was in your books for 990. You paid 1.04 million. So the extra amount you paid represents a loss to be shown in your income statement. So recognize a loss on extinguishment of debt of $50,000. That makes B to be the correct option. Innovative Inventions Incorporated needs to raise 10 million euros. If the company chooses to issue zero coupon bonds, its debt to equity ratio will most likely, first of all, if you issue a zero rated bond, maybe you issued it at 80, but when you will redeem, this gap of $20 is treated like a discount amortization and it will keep on going up. 83, 87, and by the time the bond matures, it will turn 100. In other words, the carrying value of the bond will go up. The book value of your bond, it will go up with the passage of time. How would it affect its debt to equity ratio? Debt to equity. Since the book value of debt is increasing every year, so your debt to equity ratio will rise. Your debt to equity ratio most likely rise as the maturity date approaches. Why? Because the carrying value of the bond is increasing by amortization of the discount. That is A. Next, Fairmont Golf issued fixed rate debt when interest rate were 6%. Rates have since risen to 7%. Using only the carrying amount based on historical cost reported on the balance sheet to analyze the company's financial position would most likely cause an analyst to do what? What has happened? Your interest rates when the bonds were issued were 6%. Right now the interest rates have gone up. Remember, when the interest rate, the market interest rate goes up, the bond value falls. They move in the opposite direction. Now what has happened since the interest rate have gone up? the market value of the bonds has fallen, but you are carrying a liability at a higher amount. Your liability is at a higher amount which has fallen in the market because of the higher interest rate. So you as an analyst, what you will conclude? What has happened? Our economic liabilities are overstated. The value of the bond has fallen, but we are carrying the carrying value of our liability, the book value, at a higher amount. So we have basically overestimated our economic liability just because of the difference between the carrying value and the book value, which is now lowered because of the higher interest rate. That makes A to be the correct option. Which of the following is an example of affirmative debt covenants? Affirmative debt covenants means that certain actions that a borrower is required to take, like regular payments of interest, payment of principal, if it's a collateralized bond against property, plant and equipment, the maintenance of equipment. So prohibited from entering into a merger, that is a negative covenant. Prevention. Prevented from issuing excessive debt, it's a negative debt covenant. Affirmative, in fact, requires certain actions from the issuer. So affirmative debt covenant required to perform regular maintenance on equipment pledged as collateral. We have issued bonds against property, about plant and equipment. So under the affirmative debt covenant, we are required to maintain the plant and equipment in good order. So that makes C to be the correct option. Debt covenants are least likely to place restriction on the issuer's ability to, least likely. Pay dividends, yes, because payment of dividend will put business in constraint. Business will have trouble in paying interest in the future because cash will fall, the cash balance will fall. Issuing additional debt, again, this could put existing bondholders in trouble. The business might be facing trouble in paying interest payments. So these A and B, they are most likely to be restricted. Which one is least likely to be restricted? This one. Because issuance of additional equity will bring in more cash. When more cash comes in, the ability of the issuer to meet obligation increases. So this is something that is least likely to be restricted by the issuer's ability to pay. This is least likely to, because this eventually goes in favor of the bondholders. So this is least likely to be restricted. C is the right answer. Compared to using finance lease, a lessee that makes use of an operating lease, please remember, under the new standard, operating lease and finance lease, they are treated in the same way. Their accounting is the same. Initial recognition of asset and liability, but it's the subsequent measurement of asset that is different. So they are treated in the same way, finance and operating lease, under the new US GAAP. But since this question has been solved using the past leasing standard, the older one, so under the operating lease, when you take an asset on the operating lease, the payment that you make to the lessor is considered as a rent expense. Please consider it's an older one. Under the new one, finance lease and operating lease are treated in the same way. Next. Which of the following is most likely lessee's disclosure about the operating lease? Operating leases are treated in the same way as finance lease. You debit the right of use asset, credit the liability. So they are same. So there is no separate disclosure because operating lease are no longer in notes. Operating lease doesn't appear in notes anymore. It is on the face of the balance sheet. That's the new standard. But since this is on the old standard, so operating lease must be disclosed in the notes regarding future obligations of maturities related to the operating lease. So that makes B as per the old standard, and I've given you the correct treatment under the new one. For a lessor, the leased asset appears on the balance sheet and continues to be depreciated when the lease is classified as an operating lease. Under sale type lease and finance lease, it is removed from the balance sheet of the lessor, but under operating lease, it is considered as if it is rented out to the lessee. So that makes B to be the correct option. Under the US GAAP, lessor's reported revenue at lease inception will be highest if the lease is classified as a sale type lease. In the sale type lease, the lessor recognizes two types of revenue. First is the trading revenue, because he's selling an item of $10,000 for $12,000. This gap between 10 to 12 is his operating income considered as a sale versus cost of sale gain. And further, he is leasing it out an asset for $12,000 which will be sold on lease for about $15,000 including interest. So he will make two types of gains. First is the gain between the cost of sales and the sales, and second, the gap between the price at which the sale has been item has been leased out versus the amount he will receive in total including interest. So this will result in higher revenue. Sale type lease will result in higher revenue for the lessor. So that makes A to be the correct option. A lessor will record interest income if lease is classified as a capital lease because the amount he will receive will involve a capital principal part and the interest part. Compared to finance leases, an operating lease, now finance lease and operating lease are the same. We can't say operating lease, but under the old standard, operating lease was considered as a rental arrangement. But under the new standard, finance lease and operating lease, they have same accounting treatment. Same accounting, initial recognition, subsequent measure of liabilities. It's only the difference between finance and operating lease regarding the subsequent measure of assets, the right of use assets. Next. So that was A. Under the US GAAP, which of the following would require the lessee to classify lease as a capital lease? The term is 60% of the useful life. No, 75%. There are 5 criteria. One of them was that the lease term should be more than 75% of the useful life, not 60. The lease contains an option to purchase the asset at the fair value, not at fair value. It's a price that is so attractive that the lessee is more certainly to exercise. Option to purchase, lessee is reasonably certain to exercise. So if it's at fair value, then what is the benefit for the lessee to acquire? So there is apparently no benefit for the lessee. The present value of the lease payment is 95% of the fair value. Under the new standard, the terminology is a little different. The present value of the lease payment plus residual value is greater than or equal to the fair value. This is the new standard, but under the old standard, the threshold was 90% under the old standard. So the present value of the lease payment had to be greater than 90% under the old standard. The newer one requires a stringent criteria. So under the old criteria, C is the right answer. Next, a lessee that enters into a finance lease will report lease payable on the balance sheet. Yes. Under the finance lease, you debit the right of use asset and credit the lease liability. Is true. A is the right option even under the new or old standard. That is perfectly correct. Okay, next. A company enters into a finance lease agreement to acquire the use of an asset for 3 years with lease payments of 19 million euros starting next year. The lease asset has fair market value of 49 million euros and the present value of the lease payment is 47.25 million. Based on this information, the value of the lease payable reported on the balance sheet will be, remember, the reported right of use asset and the liability is the present value of minimum lease payments plus any residual value guaranteed by the lessee. Since we have only this number that is given at the present value, this is the amount at which you will debit the right of use asset, 47.25 million, and you credit the liability and the lease of this with the same amount. So that will make A to be the correct option. Next. Which of the following best describe reporting and disclosure requirement for a company that enters into an operating lease as a lessee? Operating lease is now treated as same as finance lease under the US GAAP. There are no explanations given in the notes now, but yes, under the previous standard, operating lease required disclosures in the notes. Now you cannot hide the operating lease in notes. Operating lease is shown on the face of the balance sheet as if it's a finance lease. That's the new standard. So for now, B is the right answer, but you should know the facts as well. B is the right answer. Now, Cavalier Copper Mines has 840 million in total liabilities and 520 millions in shareholders' equity. Okay. It discloses operating lease commitments over the next 5 years with the present value of 100 million in the notes under the old standard. It is no longer allowed. This must be reported on the balance sheet as a liability. If these lease commitments are treated as debt, the debt to total capital ratio is closest to. Now, existing debt to total capital is 840. That is your debt, and this is the equity, right? If you incorporate this lease into the books of accounts, it will represent as a part of debt, and in the denominator we have to show, because we need to find debt upon equity, the ratio we will be using debt to total capital. Yes, debt to total capital means it's going to be 840 upon 840 plus 520. This is the debt to total capital ratio. Since we want to bring this lease into our computation as if it's a finance lease, so we will have to add the same amount in the debt here in 840 and in this 840 as well. So it's going to be 940. So you will calculate 940 upon 940 plus 520, incorporating this lease into the numerator and denominator to calculate the new debt to total capital ratio. So when you will calculate this 940 over 940 plus 520, it will give you 0.64. This is debt to total capital ratio. Total capital means debt plus equity. So that is C. The following presents selected financial information for the company. The financial leverage ratio. Financial leverage ratio is the average total assets upon average shareholders' equity. And we have been given the numbers. Average assets are given as 45,981 million upon average shareholders' equity is given as 18,752, and their simplification should give you 2.452. Straightforward. C is the right answer. An analyst evaluating 3 industrial companies calculates the following ratios: debt to equity for ABC, interest coverage for ABC, the company with both the lowest financial leverage and the greatest ability to meet interest payments. Lowest financial leverage is for company B, and the greatest ability to meet interest payments is B. So this company B has the lowest debt to equity, lowest financial leverage, and at the same time it has the highest interest coverage, so that makes B to be the correct option. An analyst evaluating a company's solvency gathers the following information: short-term debt, long-term debt, total shareholders' equity, total assets, EBIT, interest payments. What are we required to calculate? Debt to assets. Debt to assets means total debt to total assets, meaning thereby we will take total debts, that is current and non-current combined, 1258 plus 321 upon total assets given in single number 8750. So 1258 plus 321 upon 8750 gives you 0.18. That makes A to be the correct option. Last question and then we are done. Penben Corporation has a defined benefit pension plan. Fine. At 31st December, its pension obligation is 10 million and pension assets are 9 million. Under either IFRS or US GAAP, treated in the same way, the reporting on the balance sheet would be closest to which of the following? If you remember, we compare the obligations with the asset. The difference would either be net liability, net pension liability, or net pension asset. Since our obligations are more than the assets by 1 million euros, so it has to be reported as a liability. It's a net pension obligation of 1 million euros, so that makes B to be our correct option. This is the last question here. Question number 36. The following information is associated with the company that offers its employees a defined benefit plan. Fair value of the fund assets 1.5 and present value of estimated pension obligations 1.2. The difference between these would either be asset or a liability. Since we have more assets than the estimated pension obligations, so it will represent it as a net assets value. So based on this information, the company's balance sheet will present a net pension asset of $300 million. That makes A to be the correct option, and that also completes your EOC questions.